News.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Cers Jr. related to the child sex abuse case. Once Cers Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving the search warrants for the child sex abuse case, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street house became known. The child sex abuse cases involve intrafamily relations and do not pose a risk to the general public, and I would also add, does not involve human trafficking. This case all started with diligent Dollar General clerks calling authorities with concerns over children they observed. We asked the public to be mindful of the circumstances around them, especially involving children. We continue to ask for the public's respect for the rights and privacy of the child victims in this case. I'd like to add a thank you to the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and BCI for their investigative efforts, which have been amazing. This case is going to be prosecuted by myself, Kara Keating, Assistant Attorney General, and Annika Collins, Highland County Prosecuting Attorney. Thank you.
These cases began as an investigation into family child sex abuse.
A Vinton County grand jury today has issued indictments in 3 criminal cases involving sexual abuse and child endangerment. These charges stem from criminal investigations conducted by the Vinton County Sheriff's Office and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. The cases are being prosecuted by the Vinton County Prosecutor's Office with the assistance from the Highland County Prosecutor's Office and the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit. In December of 2025, at the request of the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, BCI's Special Victims Unit opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. Information obtained in this investigation prompted BCI in March of 26 to open a second investigation, this one involving allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. On June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence in Hampton, Ohio, and Vinton County on Omar Street. There have been a lot of speculation and questions regarding the June 30th presence on Omar Street in Hampton. These indictments provide some insight into the ongoing investigation. However, to preserve the integrity of the ongoing investigation and to protect the victims, I conclude my statement here. I am thankful for the work of my deputies and our fellow partners at BCI. We will continue to pursue justice in these cases.
That sentence was delivered by Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer, and it was meant to explain how law enforcement ended up at a house on Omar Street in rural Ohio. It does not explain, it buries the mechanism inside passive voice. The mechanism was a DNA search warrant. Law enforcement sought the DNA of Gary Cers Jr., related to a child sex abuse case. Once Cers Jr. was located, search warrants were executed to secure his DNA for genetic testing. Upon serving those search warrants, the existence and condition of the 16 children at the Omar Street house became known. Stop on that phrase. Became known. Imagine a search warrant as a hook lowered into a dark well. The state lowered that hook looking for one man's genetic code. What came up was 16 children. 16 children were already there. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually, the official record is precise if you read it slowly. In December of 2025, at the request of the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations opened an investigation into allegations of sexual abuse involving 2 children. That is Investigation 1. It centered on 2 men, Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson. Information obtained in that investigation prompted BCI, in March of 2026, to open a second investigation. That second investigation involved allegations of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. It led to Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers. So the state did not start with 16 children. It started with 2 victims in one case and a minor in another. The house on Omar Street was not the origin point. The house on Omar Street was the destination of a chain of evidence. That distinction matters because it tells you how the system actually works. It moves from victim testimony to suspect identification to search warrant. It does not move from a welfare check to a rescue. It moves from a criminal investigation to a discovery.
Well, that was somewhat telegraphed, as we talked about the other day.
Yeah. statement of the prosecutor from Vinton County in opposing reduction of bond for Elizabeth. And so we knew something was coming. What seems surprising about this, and it is really unclear as to who the alleged victims are, it looks like the indictment or charges against the two siders go back to 2022, the first quarter of 2022, against unnamed victims, but they were related to the investigation of the other two people indicted on sex offenses today. Curiously enough, the press release indicates that the victims were not a member of the immediate family of the siders, but at the same time, the statement given by the county prosecutor would seem that perhaps they were. So that's something that you and others are going to have to dig into and clarify.
Then on June 30th, authorities executed a search warrant at a residence on Omar Street in Hampton, Ohio. The stated purpose was to secure Gary Cers Jr.'s DNA for genetic testing. The result was the discovery of 16 children. 16 children were already there. Now the prosecutor added 3 phrases to contain the fallout. He said the child sex abuse cases involve intrafamily relations. He said they do not pose a risk to the general public. He said the case does not involve human trafficking. Those phrases are not reassurance. They are containment. They tell the public the danger is not roaming the neighborhood. But they also reveal something darker. If the danger is intrafamily, then the children inside that home were the ones exposed to it. The state's attempt to shrink the threat also enlarges the failure. And then there is the detail the prosecutor offered almost as a virtue. He credited diligent Dollar General clerks with calling authorities about concerns over children they observed. Read that carefully. A retail employee at a discount store noticed something wrong. Not a teacher, not a social worker, not a pediatrician, not a caseworker, a clerk at Dollar General.
So the sheriff said that this investigation is ongoing. And we know from the Vinton County prosecutor telling the commissioners we're seeking permanent custody of the children, that's going to happen. And they will more than likely be successful in obtaining permanent custody of the children, especially if there's a conviction on a sex crime. So I'm thinking to myself, if this investigation is ongoing, is there going to be more there? Are we going to see potentially more indictments?
Well, at least if they thought they had enough on inter-family sexual misconduct, I would have included it in the indictment today. And so either they don't have enough because it wasn't going on inside the family home, or the children are still in the process of being interviewed, going through social workers and psychological treatment and testing, and they may not want to proceed at this point. They can always, as you know, produce a superseding indictment with new charges, new victims after they're arraigned on this indictment and while it's pending.
That single sentence is a confession about every other institution that had a legal obligation to see what a cashier saw in a checkout line. But the timeline also exposes the containment narrative around the warrant itself. For weeks, the public was told this was about a public indecency warrant.
And, we still have pieces of this puzzle that we are assembling. One thing that really piqued my interest was that William Archer, the Vinton County prosecutor, said that alert Dollar General employees contacted law enforcement about their concerns about some of the children that they saw with Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Cers. They were very concerned. And so it seems like potentially we may have had a couple of different things going on here. We have Dollar General employees, and then we also have this investigation one where information is gathered and gleaned about the couple. And all of that was enough to potentially get this search warrant for the house on June 30th.
Yes, and at least it's probably the addition of all that kind of information, potentially from co-defendants, victims on the first case, and the children may have said something at the Dollar General to an employee there that piqued their interest and passed it on to law enforcement. And then they were already looking into the matters the other two men and the Cers had been involved in going back. That's 4 years that the alleged misconduct in that case is alleged to occurred.
Mhm. What's very interesting to me about this, Ron, I went down to Vinton County, and employees at the Dollar General said to me, I'm really sorry. I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you. And I thought maybe it was a corporate thing. Corporate came down on them and said, no, we don't do that. Because a lot of times when you're dealing with these big chains, you have to go through, the corporate media relations office and things of that nature. And now I'm wondering, were these the people that potentially called in to law enforcement?
That story was useful because it made the search sound minor. Yet you do not bring the Ohio Attorney General's Special Prosecutions Unit to serve a warrant for public indecency. You bring them when the warrant is for DNA in a child sex abuse case. The scale of the response tells you the scale of the allegation before any child was found. The hard evidence in the indictment is even more precise.
Yeah, we're digging into that for sure and clarifying. And I want to read what the press release says. It says the indictment alleges that between January and September 2022, the defendants engaged in sexual conduct with a minor more than 10 years younger than their own age. The victim is not a member of their immediate family. So it said, that he said, this says not a member of the immediate family. However, the prosecutor said this was an intrafamily thing. So are we left to believe it's not their own children, but potentially, another child in the family?
It alleges that between January and September of 2022, Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers engaged in sexual conduct with a minor more than 10 years younger than their own age. The victim is not a member of their immediate family.
And at least since the two investigations were tied, the ones for which the indictment on the sex offenses against the Cers today arose from the investigation of the other two men indicted in the case. It may be that the same victims are involved, and that in the course of the first investigation, the victims relayed that the Cers also were involved either with the knowledge of the two other men and also indicted today, or whether or not they was a follow-up.
And I've learned that investigation one, which involves Josh Saunders and Brandon Henderson, this is investigation one that it began in December of 2025. The information about Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers was developed from that investigation. So that is what led the law enforcement officers initially to that house on June 30th. People were saying, oh, it's because they went there for a public indecency warrant for Gary Jr. I think you and I knew the whole time, and I've been saying the whole time, no, they didn't go there with a search warrant for a public indecency case. This was going to be much more serious.
Yeah, and I think we both kind of concluded that at the time, based on the conduct of the investigators. You don't have the Ohio Attorney General down in Vinton County for a warrant on a exposing case. And it's interesting how that exposing case may tie in with these subsequent charges. The only thing I can try and extrapolate from this is either the two men that are charged in the case as well are providing information to the prosecutor and the attorney general that led them to the Cers, or alternatively, the victims in that case provided information that the two men not only perped on them, but that the Cers were involved in sexual misconduct with them. Either of those options would tell me is likely as to how they got on the doorstep.
But the prosecutor called the case intrafamily. That is not a small contradiction. It is a crack in the official narrative. If the victim is not immediate family, but the case is intrafamily, then the victim is likely a relative outside the immediate household. That means the abuse moved through a family network, not just a single home. It also means the 16 children found on Omar Street may not be the only children who need to be interviewed. So here is the question that turns this from a local indictment into a systems failure. If a DNA warrant meant for one suspect exposed 16 children, how many more threads have to be pulled before we know what was really happening in that family? The state is now seeking permanent custody of the children.
Yes, it's interesting that the elder Cers were not indicted on any sex offenses, either within the family or outside the family. They are just facing the multiple endangering children charges that range from a misdemeanor up to the second-degree felony. So what we can conclude from that is apparently they don't have enough evidence now to proceed on sex offenses inside that home, or alternatively, they never occur.
The sheriff says the investigation is ongoing. Former prosecutors have noted that a superseding indictment with new charges and new victims can still be produced. That means the June 30th discovery was not the end of the story. It was the first time the state had to look directly at a house it had already been circling for months. 16 children were already there. The state did not find them first. A combination of victim testimony, DNA collection, and a cashier's concern finally forced the system to open the door. That is not diligence. That is delay with better optics. Now go to the Benton County Clerk of Court's website and pull the indictment for Gary Cers Jr. and Elizabeth Cers. Read the charging language carefully, then answer this question in the comments. Who are the unnamed victims? And why does the prosecutor call this intrafamily, while the indictment says the victim is not a member of the immediate family? If this timeline raises questions for you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to